There are many ways to slip up when writing relationships, particularly when it comes to relationship conflicts, and it can be a fine balancing act of keeping the characters sympathetic and the audience invested in their relationship, while at the same time not having the whole thing come across as contrived. That being said, Amy and Rory have a toxic, abusive marriage and shouldn't be together, and here's why. Revived Doctor Who has a troubled history with portraying unhealthy relationship dynamics going right back to its first series, where Rose repeatedly mistreats Mickey, taking for granted he will always be there for her regardless, even to the point where she has the nerve to turn around and lambast him for dating someone else. Meanwhile, she is free to flirt with just about anyone who enters the TARDIS and start forming a romantic attachment to the Doctor. Her sense of bratty entitlement really knows no bounds, and when Mickey finally does what he should have done all along and cuts Rose off by staying in Pete's world, her response is pretty predictable.
She's still alive, my old gran, remember her?
Yeah.
She needs me.
What about me? What if I need you?
Yes, because it's all about you, Rose. To you, Mickey's just an emotional punching bag, and that's it. I could be generous and say Rose is a really bad girlfriend, but I prefer to be blunt and call it abuse. That is what it is, after all. And this is the character the audience is supposed to sympathise with and whom the Doctor deems a worthy companion. Nice job there, Russell. Now, Steven Moffat managed to not screw things up quite so badly, at least to begin with. Kind of allegorical of his tenure as a whole, really. Sure, Amy attempting to sleep with the Doctor the night before her wedding certainly isn't a good look, but to be fair, the imaginary friend from her childhood has just literally turned up out of the blue on her wedding night and whisked her away in a time machine to see the universe. That would be emotionally disorientating for anyone, so her actions are perhaps understandable at the very least, if not excusable. Also, whereas Rose never gets directly called out or faces any consequences for her abusive behaviour, what Amy does has lasting ramifications for her relationship with Rory, which come to a head in episodes like Amy's Choice and Day of the Moon. Both of those stories strongly emphasise that Amy has made her decision and will be faithful to Rory from now on, and so come the end of Series 6 they are in a happy and apparently healthy marriage and all seems well. And then Asylum of the Daleks happened. While most critics have quite rightly slated the notorious divorce subplot, Council of Geeks chose to be the contrarian and came out in its defence, arguing the reasons established for Amy and Rory's breakup and the resultant communication breakdown between the pair are realistic and believable.
The simple fact is that statistically, most couples who lose a child don't stay together. The emotional impact on them as a couple is basically the same. And I think it rings really true because the splits that happen over things like that, the breakdown of relationships, of communications between couples, yeah, that tracks to me.
Now, there's one gaping flaw in this analysis. Well, actually, there are several, but we'll start with the one that is most striking. See, it's not so much the breakup itself that isn't believable, but rather the manner in which they get back together. Amy and Rory resolve all of their differences after a conversation lasting exactly 2 minutes. So why did they never have this conversation at any point before? Did they never attempt marriage counselling, or, even just basic, healthy communication between partners before rushing to get that divorce, if they supposedly love each other so much? But then I guess it's not surprising Amy and Rory are incapable of communicating like grown-ups, given how childishly they behave through much of this episode, taking cheap potshots and swipes at each other every 5 minutes for the first half of the runtime.
Your husband is here.
I don't have a husband.
I thought the whole point was you gave Rory up because you still love and care about him and want what's best for him. So why are you being so bitter towards him? If this is how they communicate with one another, spending months making snarky remarks at each other instead of having the 2-minute conversation that could have fixed their relationship, then they shouldn't be in one to begin with, because that is not a healthy relationship. And that's before we even consider the domestic abuse. Wait, what? Oh yeah, Moffat portrays domestic violence in this episode and apparently doesn't realize he's doing it. Okay, so let's back up for a moment. Moffat does this recurring gag of Amy slapping Rory because he seems to think women slapping men is funny for some reason. Up until this point I'd let it slide because it had at least always been shown in an affectionate context between loving partners. But then this happens.
Amy, it's me. Do you remember me? She remembers me.
Same old Amy.
Let me remind you, at this point Amy and Rory are still on bad terms. There is zero affection here. This is just Amy physically abusing Rory. Moffat, what the hell? Right, serious talk now. Slipping up as a writer is one thing, but if you are going to screw up so badly that you end up inadvertently portraying domestic abuse, then you need to stop what you are doing. This is honestly disturbing to watch, and the fact none of the production staff picked up on it at the time is a serious black mark on the program. I said at the beginning that writing relationship drama can be difficult, but there is a very simple way around it. Don't write relationship drama. The worst thing about Asylum of the Daleks is the divorce subplot is completely superfluous and has no reason to exist. It never even gets brought up again in subsequent episodes, so Moffat could have easily avoided turning Amy and Rory's relationship into something toxic and portraying domestic violence along the way, and the fact he didn't goes beyond bad writing. It's downright irresponsible. I'm Midnight, and I just lost my train of thought.